Week 2 of the XFL, and it starts Thursday night. So a standalone game Thursday night, and then one game Saturday, 2 games Sunday. I always love week 2 because I feel like there's the biggest edge. We have some data to work on. Plus, you're going to see a lot of overreactions. We kind of know what the field's going to do. They're just going to play the guys who did well week 1. And while I'm obviously going to eat some chalk when I'm building tournament lineups, I think it's important to try to identify some guys that maybe the opportunities were there, the targets were there. They just didn't put up like a big performance. So we'll try to identify some of those guys as well as talk about the chalk, the obvious plays. So yeah, I'm excited. I had a really good XFL week 1. Made about $500 profit on Prize Picks. Would have been a lot more if Josh Gordon didn't have that touchdown, because I just basically hammered every touchdown under prop, and almost all of them hit. So hopefully Prize Picks post some more touchdown props for running backs and wide receivers. But yeah, I had a nice withdrawal. I did not post the withdrawal, though, on Twitter. So does that mean the withdrawal didn't happen? You know, posting it and saying something like always withdraw, right? Since I didn't do that, did the withdrawal actually happen? You tell me. You tell me. But yeah, guys, the sponsor of the video is Prize Picks. Make sure to use the code DKDFS for 100% match up to $100. That's a free $100 to put on the site. I saw a couple people hit some six picks on Prize Picks from the video that I made. I basically was just like, guys, hammer all the unders. And yeah, it worked out in a big way for me. So I will be patiently waiting for that XFL board to drop once again. Try to get a video up there for you guys. And yeah, if you're looking for more plays, I'll have a lot of them on Patreon. If you're looking for more in-depth content for DFS, I'll have that on Patreon. I'll have snap counts, routes, targets, all that good stuff. Basically, every single piece of data that you need, I'll have over on Patreon.com. Post the week 1 depth charts as well. Like when I made my week 1 XFL video last week, we had like basically nothing to work on. We had like no depth charts out. I made that I think like Monday or Tuesday. Now we have a lot better idea of what these teams are working with, how they're going to run their offenses. So yeah, again, I'm really excited for week 2. Still good size contest, everything filled, right? The 100K tournament filled. We have 50K this week. Hopefully that can continue, maybe even bump up if these continue to fill. I don't know, but it was good football. Like I watched, what game did I watch? I watched one of the Saturday games, and it was pretty exciting. So yeah, that's everything, guys. So let's just get into the video. Let's first talk about the Vegas odds for these games, and then we can go team by team. Talk about some chalk. Talk about some maybe guys that are going to go a bit lower owned, ways you can get different. So we'll start off with those odds. And the first game, we got the Battlehawks and the Sea Dragons at a 36.5 over under. The Sea Dragons are currently 3-point favorites. To be honest, I would have thought this over-under would have been a bit higher, just the way that Seattle played. They were super up-tempo, pass first, so if I was a betting man, probably would be taking the over in that game. DC Defenders and Vegas Vipers is the second game, 36.5 over-under. Vegas are 3-point favorites. We'll see. Luis Perez started out looking good and then kind of cooled off there. The Brahmas and the Guardians is the early Sunday game. That's a 38.5 over-under, which I'm not sure why that's like higher than the other two. Both teams kind of run first. The Guardians not look great. We got the Brahmas currently 3-point favorites, and the Renegades and the Roughnecks is the last game, 40 over-under. Houston are currently 4-point favorites. All right, so we're just going to team by team, and we'll start off with St. Louis, who A.J. McCarron basically didn't do a ton until the very end of the game when he had 2 touchdowns and converted that onside, which is the 4th and 15. I'm going 18 of 26 for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think McCarron, once again, is a relatively safe quarterback play. We did not see any of the backups, which we did see for majority of teams. Like a lot of teams utilized 2 quarterbacks. We did not see that for St. Louis. They stuck with A.J. McCarron, who I still think is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So I think he's a relatively safe play. At the running back position, so Brian Hill got a little bit banged up early on. He ended up coming back in. He finished with 21 of the 49 snaps. And then you saw Kareem Walker play 21 of the 49 as well, with Mateo Durant playing 7 snaps. So I actually think Brian Hill could have played a little bit more if he didn't get banged up. He had 6 carries for 55 yards, 3 receptions as well. So I don't think he's going to be super popular because he just didn't put up like a massive score. But I do have some interest in Brian Hill as a more contrarian running back play. Don't think I would get to either of the other running backs. So for wide receiver for St. Louis, Austin Proehl was a guy that there was 2 guys that I mentioned on Patreon that I liked his contrarian plays last week. It was Austin Proehl and Kirkland, and they both smashed. So that worked out in a big way. Proehl kind of came alive there at the end, had a touchdown. I think he had that 2 or 3 point conversion as well. He finished with 4 targets, 4 receptions, and he ended up playing 39 of the 49 snaps. So I think he'll be a relatively popular value play this week, but for good reason. Again, he was heavily involved. They have a Q tag on here for some reason. I'm not sure why. We'll keep an eye on that. But I think he's going to be a pretty popular value play, definitely a safer play on this slate. The other 2 wide receivers that played a majority of the game were Marcel Aitman, who was kind of quiet until the very end, and Darius Shepard. Aitman played 46 of the 49 snaps. Shepard played 48 of the 49. So basically 3 wide receivers played a majority of the game. Hakeem Butler played 17 of the 49 snaps. But I think Aitman and Shepard are good contrarian plays. Aitman, still one of the more talented wide receivers in the league, in my opinion. Only had 2 catches, but again, the opportunities were there. He almost had a touchdown at the end of the game. Finished with 4 targets, and then Shepard finished with 3 targets. Again, he played a majority of the game as well. So, I think those 2 are kind of interesting contrarian plays. Aitman especially, just because I think he still has that big play upside. And since he only put up 6 fantasy points, almost no one's going to play him. But I think he's a nice bounce back candidate. The tight end position, let's see, was there anything I wanted to mention? No, not really. I don't think I would play any of the tight ends. So let's move on to Seattle. So Seattle, we got news before the game that they were going to play everyone on the roster, which kind of made them a bit riskier. But we only saw 1 drive for backup quarterback Steven Montez, and he only played 5 total snaps. So DiNucci played 73 of the 78 snaps. I think he'll probably be the most popular quarterback play of the slate, but it's hard not to like him, especially the way that this offense ran. I mean, he threw 54 passes. So I think you got to like Ben DiNucci there at the top of 10.2K. Unless we hear that they're going to mix in quarterbacks again, I think he stands out as one of the best and probably will be one of the more popular quarterback plays of the week. So running back for Seattle, this team was definitely pass heavy. They utilized 3 running backs. Morgan Ellison played 33 snaps. Brendan Knox played 28. However, they didn't really run a lot of routes, right? Ellison, while he played 33 snaps, he only ran 8 routes, was pass blocking for 20 of those. Well, Knox was only ran 2 routes, was pass blocking for 15. So the way that they ran their offense, it wasn't great. Like, these running backs weren't running a lot of routes. They're in there for pass protection. So definitely, downgrade the 2 backs. Knox is probably the guy that's going to get more carries. I did like Ellison as a contrarian play last week, and he was basically just out there for pass blocking, didn't run a ton of routes. So both running backs, more contrarian options. Wide receiver, so this is where you're going to get some chalk, right? You had Pearson finished with 12 catches on 13 targets. Blake Jackson, 8 catches on 11 targets. And Josh Gordon, 6 catches on 9 targets. So I think all 3 receivers really look good for Seattle. They did play a lot of receivers, but those guys played a good chunk of the game. Blake Jackson actually played 76 of the 78 snaps. You had Pearson play 57 of the 78. Josh Gordon played 56 of the 78. And you had Jordan VC play 57 of the 78 as well. So those are probably the 4 wide receivers I would personally look to. Josh Gordon, good option at the top, obviously. Again, that 1 touchdown really tilts me. Cost me about another $500 in profit on Prize Picks, but he looks good. I think Pearson will probably be the chalk since he had the biggest week. Last week, he had 12 catches on 13 targets. And definitely a cash game target. But Blake Jackson, I think, would be the pivot, right? Didn't have as big of a week, but actually out-snapped Pearson. Played a lot more, 76 compared to 57. So I think Jackson would be like your GPP pivot off of Pearson. I think if people are running Seattle stacks, they're going to jam Gordon, they're going to jam Pearson. But don't forget about Blake Jackson and even Jordan Vesey, right? I think no one's going to play him. Now, he didn't do a ton, but he played 57 snaps and had four targets. So if you wanted to get really off the board, he's someone at the min price I think you could use, right? He was out there a good chunk. Seattle basically ran 4 wide receivers the entire game. So Blake Jackson, I think, would be the pivot, but if you want to get really different in tournaments, then it would be VC. Let's move on to DC and Vegas. So DC, mentioned this. I hammered the under on Jordan Ta'amu passing yards. They kind of hinted at using 2 quarterbacks, and they did. So Ta'amu played 42 snaps, and Derek King played 15 snaps. It kind of makes it tough for me to get to either of these quarterbacks. The positive with these quarterbacks are they both have rushing upside. Like we saw it, Ta'amu scored one on the ground, and Derek King scored one on the ground. But if both quarterbacks are going to mix in, I would say they're just more tournament options. Now, if we get some clarity that, all right, it's just going to be Ta'amu this week or it's just going to be King this week, then I would be very high on them. But as it stands right now, kind of more just tournament-only plays. At running back, one guy that was extremely popular that I luckily did not play was Abram Smith. And the reason I didn't was just because I knew he wasn't going to be super involved in the pass game. He's more of that bruising back. And that was kind of the downside, is he just really didn't do anything in the passing game, had 28 yards in the ground, and that was it. Raquel Armstead was actually a bit more involved in the passing game. He played less snaps. He played 20 snaps at the 57, 40 at the 57 for Abram Smith, but Armstead was a bit more involved in the passing game. Both running backs, I would say, are a bit more contrarian options. But yeah, Smith playing 40 snaps is still a decent amount of snaps, and if he finds his way in the end zone, he could pay off that salary. Wide receiver for DC, I think all these guys are going to be pretty low owned, but like I agree. Like I think they should be low owned the way this offense ran. They're a run first team. They had a lot of quarterback runs. Looking at the snap data, you had Josh Hammond play 45 of the 57 snaps. Chris Blair played 43 of the 57. Lucky Jackson played 37 of the 57. Azard only played 10 snaps. That was one that I took the L on because he was listed atop the depth chart, and I actually pivoted from Josh Gordon to Azard in my GBP lineup because I was a little bit out of the cash, and I was like, all right, if I play Josh Gordon, I don't think it's going to, like, he's going to be way too chalky. So I went to Hazard, and that just didn't work. Like, they just barely played him. Like, he was only really reusing him in the return game. So if I'm going to play any of these receivers, I think it would be Hammond, Blair, or Jackson just based on the snap counts. Hammond is 7,400. Jackson is 4,600. And who's going to mention? Chris Blair is $3,000. So those would be some contrarian plays. Jackson had the most targets for what it's worth. He had 5 targets, 4 catches. Hammond had 1 catch and 2 targets, and Blair had 1 catch on 1 target. The tight end, Ethan Wolf, did have 4 targets, only 1 catch, though. Moving on to Vegas. So Vegas, we could possibly see Brett Huntley come in this week. Like Luis Perez looked good to start, but then had some costly turnovers. So we'll keep an eye on this news. If Perez starts again, then sure, we can go back to the well there. If they start Brett Huntley, then I do have some interest in him at 7K because Huntley does have some rushing upside. Running back position for the Vegas Vipers, I think you're just going to get some contrarian plays here. So Lovett played 7 snaps. DeAndre Torrey only played 7. Or Lovett played 11. Torrey played 7. And then Rod Smith played 27. So he played the most. Didn't do a ton with them, but if you wanted to go to him in a large field tournament, I guess that's okay. Wide receiver, I think, is where we can get some good contrarian options. So Jeff Badet obviously had the massive week last week. He had 46 of the 59 snaps, playing more out of the slot. Geronimo Allison played 54 of the 59. Martavis Bryant played 55 of the 59. So I think everyone's going to gravitate towards Jeff Badet, right? 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, 81 yards. I think he's a good play. But he was unowned last week, and everyone jammed Martavis Bryant and Geronimo Allison. So now just because Badet had the 2 touchdowns, everyone's going to play him, and now no one's going to play Allison and Martavis Bryant, who are former NFL wide receivers and played a majority of the game, right? So, like, while I think Jeff Badet's a good play, I think he's going to be overowned. I think Geronimo Allison and Martavis Bryant are going to be underowned. So I like Allison and Bryant a good amount as bounce-back candidates here, especially if everyone just gravitates towards Jeff Badet. So those two I'm actually very high in for tournaments, right? The snaps were there. They got a healthy amount of targets. It's just the touchdowns both went to Jeff Badet. That's not always going to be the case, right? Martavis Bryant's a big body. He had 8 targets. He had the same amount of targets as Jeff Badet. Allison had 6 targets. So Those two I actually really, really like as contrarian plays. And again, I think what you're going to see week 2 is just a lot of overreactions. People are just going to play the guys that did well week 1. And I think that's a big, big mistake. Like, I'm not going to fade everyone that did well. I'm definitely going to eat some chalk. But it's really important in tournaments, especially large field tournaments, to mix in some of these lower owned options. And like just watching some content out there that's people have already recorded. People basically just talked about the guys that did well. It's like, it's important to identify the low-owned options, too. Like, that's how you're going to win tournaments. All right, so San Antonio, Orlando's the next game here. So, for San Antonio, Jack Cohen did play the whole game. He played 80 of the 80 snaps. He was decent, 25 of 36, 207 yards. Like, nothing crazy, and he's a pocket passer. I think he's a fair play. This team looked to be a little bit more run first, but I don't think he's going to pick up a ton of ownership. At the running back position, I think Keelan Ballage is going to be pretty popular. He played 42 of the 80 snaps. Jacquez Patrick played 35 of the 80. And Ballage was involved in the pass game as well. Ballage had 3 targets. And he's at a reasonable price point at 7.1K. Had 84 total yards on the ground. Rushed the ball 24 times. So I think he's a good cash game play. Will be popular. I don't hate Jacquez Patrick. Had 38 yards on the ground. Was involved as well. I think he's an okay pivot on the same team, especially if everyone's just going to jam Ballage. But Ballage definitely stands out as one of the best running back plays on the slate. All right, moving on to wide receivers. So I don't think any of these wide receivers are going to be super, super popular. No one put up like a massive week, but there's a couple contrarian guys that I do like. So looking at the snap counts here for San Antonio, you had Landon Akers play 48 of the 80 snaps. Jalen Tolliver played 68 of the 80. DJ Vasher played 38 of the 80. So I think Akers, he was the guy that was the most involved. He had 7 catches on 7 targets. Tolliver had 3 catches on 5 targets. I think if you wanted to get a little bit different at wide receiver, those two guys would be in play. Landon Akers, again, former Rams wide receiver, guy that I have played in the preseason. And then Tolliver, again, he actually played the most snaps on this team. So I think those two guys are solid contrarian plays. They did play a fair amount of snaps. And again, Landon Akers had 7 targets. Was there anyone I wanted to mention for tight end? Elise Mack played 64 snaps, ran 27 routes. I don't think it's really necessary, but he's 3.2K, so did want to mention that. All right, moving on to Orlando. So, Orlando, let's see, where is... Add them up here. All right. So, they used 2 quarterbacks. Paxton Lynch played 40 snaps. Dormaday played 27. We'll keep an eye on the news here. Lynch was okay. 15 to 21 for 136 yards. Does have a little bit of rushing upside and was benched to start the 4th quarter. If he picks up the start again, I do have a little bit of interest in him. But this offense did not look great. But Lynch, if he gets to start again, he has a little bit of rushing upside. So we'll see. Moving on to the running back position. So John Maine Martin was a very, very popular play. Played 32 of the 67 snaps. Calvin Taylor played 22 of the 67. Those are the only 2 running backs on the roster. We'll see if they add anyone else. Martin's, I think, a fair play. Like, the opportunities were there. He did have 41 yards on the ground. But I think right now a bit more of a contrarian option. At the wide receiver position, again, Orlando, I don't think you're going to see a ton of ownership in this game. But there's a couple guys I wanted to mention. Charleston Rambo actually played the entire game. Played 67 of the 67 snaps. So he's an interesting option if he's going to continue to play 100% of the snaps. He had 5 targets. And then Eli Rogers, the guy I mentioned in my week 1 video, the snaps weren't as high in him, but he played 42 of the 67 snaps and did have 4 catches and 7 targets. He actually had the most targets on the team. Tight end Cody Latimer had 5 catches on 6 targets. So Rambo, again, I don't think a lot of people are going to play him. Didn't have the best week 1, but played 100% of the snaps. He's still their big play guy. Another kind of good contrarian option, in my opinion. And Eli Rogers, I think a nice pivot off of some of the chalk on the cheap end. He played the second most amount of snaps on the team and did have the most targets. He'll be playing a lot in the slot. So Rogers and Rambo, I think, are good contrarian options. Finally, Arlington and Houston. So this one should be played, this one projected to be the highest scoring game of the week. Drew Plitt played the entire game, played 63 of the 63 snaps. Maybe you see Kyle Sloter this week. It's possible. He had a decent week. 19 of 25, 172 yards with a pick. had 5 rushes for 16 yards. So I think he's a good, way to get different at the quarterback position. Running back, there's one guy, I mentioned him in my stream. I liked him as a contrarian play. He wasn't picking up a ton of ownership. Was Michigan running back Davion Smith, former Michigan running back. He played 47 and 63 snaps. Was involved in the passing game. He had 3 targets. And so he played a healthy amount of snaps. He's only 5.7K. I like him this week. I don't think a ton of people will play him. I think a lot of the chalk builds will be playing like 1 or 2 running backs. And if people are going to play running backs this week, it's going to be Max Borgi or it's going to be Kalen Ballage. So Davion Smith, reasonable price point, good amount of snaps, and was involved in the passing game. I like him. At the wide receiver position, so Arlington kind of spread it out for snaps, which is not great. You did have one guy who played a majority of the game. That was Tyler Vaughns. He played 50 of the 63 snaps. He's down here at $3,000. He had 4 catches on 5 targets. So I think he's another interesting value play at the flat min. The other wide receivers, probably not going to get to them. Jordan Smallwood only played 28 of the 63 snaps. Brandon Arcondo only played 28 of the 63. So Winningham played 25 of the 63. This team actually ran a lot of 2 tight end sets. Sal Cannella was their most targeted player, 7 targets, 50 total snaps. But if you're going to target anyone in the passing game, I think your safest bet is definitely Sal Cannella. We knew that from the USFL, right? He was the top tight end in the USFL, and he's looking good already in the XFL. So I like Sal Cannella in both formats. He'll be a popular play. Don't really know if I can get to Smallwood or Arcondo or Winningham just because the snaps. But if you wanted to go to one of those guys in the large field tournament, I guess my favorite wide receiver probably would be Tyler Vaughns, just for the amount of snaps that he played. He played the most out of any of the wide receivers on this team. And finally, Houston. So Houston, we did see 2 quarterbacks play, but Brandon Silvers looked pretty good. He played 61 of the 69 snaps. Cole McDonald played 8, came in for some rushing plays. But yeah, Silvers in this pass-heavy team looked pretty solid. Almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he's one of the better quarterback plays on the slate. He'll be popular, but again, for good reason. So I like Brandon Silvers. At the running back position, I think he's probably going to be the most popular running back. It's going to be Max Borgi. So this team was just interesting the way that they listed their guys in the depth chart. Like they have running backs listed and they have halfbacks listed. Now, if you take a look at the snaps, Borgi actually didn't play a ton of snaps. He played 32 snaps, only ran 9 routes, but was targeted on... He had 4 targets. So only ran 9 routes, but had 4 targets. Now, that's something like, I don't know if that can continue, right? So maybe he might be a bit over-owned this week. People are going to see those targets. People are going to see the big performance he had, and people are going to jam him in. Didn't run a lot of routes. He only ran 9 routes. If you take a look at Nick Holley, he played 44 snaps. He played more than Borgi and ran 34 routes. But I believe he did not have a target. He had 1 target. He was out there a ton and running a ton of routes. So I think Holley is at least interesting. He did nothing. But he played more and ran 34 routes. And we know he's a good pass catcher from the XFL in 2020. So everyone's in a jam Max Borgi. And I think he's someone you could definitely play in a cash game. But just be a little bit careful. Right now, sure, the game is getting a little bit out of hand. Maybe they limited snaps a bit. But I think he'll probably be a bit over-owned. Where absolutely no one's going to play Nick Holley. But if you take a look at the data, Holley ran a lot of routes. So just wanted to mention that in a large field tournament. Wide receiver. So you're going to get some chalk here for sure. So Travell Harris had 11 targets, 6 catches. Burnett had 11 targets, 8 catches. John Trey Kirkland was a guy that I played at no ownership in tournaments. He had 5 catches on 8 targets. But the really, really positive thing about this team is basically 3 wide receivers play the entire game. Burnett and Kirkland did not leave the field. They played 100% of the snaps. Travell Harris played 55 of the 69. The only other 2 wide receivers that played, Cedric Byrd played 25 of the 69, and Ben Pootman played 11 of the 69. So I really, really like these receivers, Burnett, Kirkland, and Harris. They're going to be popular. I think Burnett will be the chalk. And again, he had the biggest week, 8 catches, 12 targets, and a touchdown. But if a lot of people gravitate towards Burnett, like I am totally fine playing John Trey Kirkland for lower ownership or even Travell Harris for lower ownership. So again, right, everyone's just going to jam in the guys that had the biggest weeks week 1. And while I think Burnett's a good play, I like Kirkland and Harris as pivots. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to mention here? I think that's it. Yes, we talked about Nick Holly, right? It's just interesting that he ran 44 total snaps and ran 34 routes. Only had 1 target. But I think that's it for Houston. I think it's going to do it for the video as well. So if you guys have been enjoying the XFL content, again, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll try to get a video up there for prize picks. Definitely when the board first drops, I'm going to post a ton of plays over on Patreon. And then I'll make a video with talking about a few plays that I do like there. If you guys are looking for more in-depth content for this, I'll have Excel sheets with every data possible, right? Routes, targets, snap share, all that stuff will be posted on Patreon if you guys are more looking for that. And then Player Pool live stream, a bunch of content there. So if you guys have any questions, you can always leave me in the comment section. Also, if you sign up for the gold package, you'll get my prize picks plays as well. Did very, very well week 1. So thanks again for watching, guys. It's great to have the XFL back, and we'll see you all in the next video.